Vanillaware's art kicks ass. Look at this lion, look at this dragon, look at these weirdly proportioned female characters. Okay, maybe I could do without those. But no amount of well-endowed women would keep people coming back if the gameplay wasn't also good. And Unicorn Overlord is yet another banger. There's just one problem though. The game's story is just okay, and it drags down the whole game. Unicorn Overlord is, at its core, a strategy RPG. Sure, it's also an RTS with deep squad building and turn-based automatic battles, but structurally, the game sends you into a fight, gives you a story segment, and then sends you into another fight just like most other SRPGs, which means the story is kind of important for player motivation. If you're going to bookend every fight with story, it should make you want to discover what happens next, and give the player an extra reason to push on. It's not like the writing is wholly bad, the game's characters are likable, and individual interactions hold some interest, but the problem is that, overall, there's little reason to anticipate what might happen next. The thing is, Vanillaware knows how to do this right. Their first game was Grim Grimoire, a real-time strategy game with a large story element that I quite enjoyed. Grim Grimoire and Unicorn Overlord share good character writing, but the difference maker is the mystery element. In Grim Grimoire, Lilith Blan arrives at a fantastical magical school, learns about magic, and meets new people. And then everyone is murdered by an escaped spirit. But just before she's about to die, the clock strikes midnight and she's thrown back in time, now able to investigate who unleashed the spirit and save everyone's lives. This is a straightforward whodunit, and it gives the story momentum since it's such an easy to understand question. Unicorn Overlord also opens up a question early on. Why did all of Cornia's most loyal defenders defect and become cruel generals for the opposing side? What changed these people in the last 10 years? The answer, of course, is given in the first 30 minutes of the game. They were mind controlled, and you can break the mind control and they'll be normal again. All the people that weren't mind controlled were evil from the start, and killing them is presented as straightforwardly good. In theory, good versus evil stories are fine, but in this case the game struggles to articulate a reason you should want to know what happens next. When reading a book, motivation comes from the characters. You can decide the book is boring and stop turning the page, but the protagonist is the one who has to want something badly enough to take action. In video games though, the player needs to want to do something, or else they won't take any action in the game. Unicorn Overlord's gameplay does a decent job of this. You're rewarded for finishing fights and exploring new areas with items that'll make you more powerful, and the individual fights are fun, so it's satisfying to run around hitting people and becoming more powerful. But when you add story to the mix, things get more complicated. The general loop is, you find a guy, he's mean, you beat the guy, we won, now he joins us. Why does the player want to progress this narrative? This doesn't give us a reason to think the next story chunk is urgent, or likely to change things. Contrast this with the studio's previous game, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, in which you could choose between a variable number of the game's 13 protagonists in almost any order, and progress whichever story you thought was most interesting first, slowly uncovering the mystery of the game's time-bending mech vs kaiju world. It's baffling to go from a game whose story was both compelling and player-driven, to one where I slowly realized I didn't care that much. And my emotional engagement with the story is the core problem here. 13 Sentinels and Grim Grimoire made me excited to learn what the hell was going on, what crazy twist would happen next. Unicorn Overlord made me wonder whether anything happening actually mattered as much as the game seemed to imply. When it comes to story, a lot of games are structured pretty straightforwardly. Story is given as a kind of reward once a gameplay sequence is completed, but that approach means that the story has to be compelling and something that the player, not the player character, actually cares about. In the case of Elaine, the main protagonist of Unicorn Overlord, I do kinda care. It's nice to free people from tyranny, and I agree with this sense of justice. But the broader context for this lacks meaning. I'm fighting an evil empire to free people for justice, which could be describing just about any sci-fi or fantasy story for children from the last 50 years. The other approach to story is to make things personal, and make the player care deeply about the character relationships, consequences, and the emotions the player character feels. But for most of the game, Elaine is pretty dispassionate. He wants to save people, but he's not personally affected by what happens to them, except for very early on. At the beginning of the game, Elaine's mother is killed by the evil Emperor. 10 years later, Scarlet, his best friend and possible love interest, is kidnapped. This gives him two relatively strong motivations: revenge for his mother's death, and a desperate worry for his friend. But Elaine doesn't really want revenge. He wants justice and freedom for all. He occasionally worries that he might have selfish reasons for fighting the Empire, but the traumatic end to his childhood doesn't burn in his chest, affecting his every action. He's kinda over it. And 6 or so hours into the game, you rescue Scarlet, and from then on, there are a few personal stakes to the story. For those first 6 hours, I wanted to save Scarlet and help Elaine not lose another person who was important to him. But after that, Elaine didn't have another personal motivation. He didn't seem to care much, so I didn't either. I wish Unicorn Overlord's story was more like 13 Sentinels. Not that it needed to have 13 protagonists or endless plot twists, but I wanted to have a sense of urgency and fun that made me boot up my PlayStation every day, hungry to discover what happened next. I wanted there to be raw, powerful emotion, and instead, the story is as distant as its top-down gameplay. Unicorn Overlord makes it fun to design your units, tweaking their programming until they attack just right. It makes it fun to slowly take over the map, meeting new characters and helping them out. But it doesn't make it fun to learn what happens next, and even scantily clad women don't change that.